Let's open our Bibles to John, the 7th chapter, if you would, please. John chapter 7. We'll arrive there in just a few moments. Have you ever wondered why people, when facing the same difficulties, react in different kinds of ways? Some people can take a certain circumstance and they're the picture of hopelessness. It's like a black cloud is hovering over their heads, and as they walk through life, they see everything is just a huge downer, and all circumstances are just bad. That's just how they look at things. Then you have another person that when they go through the same exact circumstance, they look at it completely different. They look at it in a very hopeful kind of way. They're able to experience joy. They're able to go through that circumstance as if, when just looking at them, you think that everything is right in the world with them. So I got to thinking, why in the world is it that two people with the same circumstance can react completely differently? Well, the answer could be possibly in geography. Just looking at things like this morning, you might recall that I mentioned to you that when you talk about the wilderness or the great and terrible wilderness, the water was a premium and that the land was known as a place that drinks the water. Maybe it has something, or the answer to that question falls within that very thing itself. I never thought of Israel as being a place that drinks water. I never thought of it as being a place that didn't have a lot of water. And yet a good portion of Israel does not have any water whatsoever unless it can be found. In fact, when you look at places like, Masada or Megiddo or Jericho or even Jerusalem itself, those places depended completely upon water. For us, it's not that big of a thing. I mean, for us, we have multiple taps in our house. We just turn on the tap and we have all the water that we want. But back in that day, water was a premium. And those palaces or those fortresses or those cities could not exist unless they were able to obtain water and keep water and retain the water that was there before them. Israel has two main bodies of water in the whole country. In fact, it almost completely depends on the Sea of Galilee alone for all their fresh water. At the same time, 63 miles to the south of it is the Dead Sea. And the Dead Sea, it's completely different in every way. There's a reason why it's called the Dead Sea. The Sea of Galilee is found in the northern part of Galilee. It's fed with fresh water that comes from Mount Carmel and comes down through Caesarea Philippi and through Tel Dan and so forth. And two streams fall into the Jordan River that is a freshwater, a tremendous river in that itself, and it then flows into the Sea of Galilee, and Galilee becomes a teeming place that is full of all kinds of life. And in Jesus' day, and even in this day, lots of communities gather around that sea. In Jesus' day, there was Capernaum and Magdala, and of course, Chorazin was a little bit above. There are fisheries all around. In fact, within the Roman Empire, the Sea of Galilee was known for its fisheries and the quality of fish that they were able to gather from it. It is from that place that Jesus chose to be fishers of men, Peter, Andrew, of course, James, and John. When you look at the Sea of Galilee, it is an incredible place. Even today, if you were to go there, you'll see that people are all around the lake itself. What's interesting today, you see speedboats out on the lake. You see jet skis on the lake, people on boards with sails on them and so forth. You see people along the shore swimming around Magdala and so forth, or even around Capernaum. Those are places that communities gathered around because of the fresh water that was there. Life was there. Go 63 miles to the south, though. The Jordan River flows into the Sea of Galilee and out of the Sea of Galilee and on down 63 miles as it winds down through the desert and eventually empties out into the Dead Sea. But the Dead Sea is a closed place. The water doesn't go out of the Dead Sea. It just goes there and collects and pulls up. That's what happens there to that sea there. It's called the Dead Sea for a reason because of its chemical makeup and so forth. It doesn't allow aquatic life to live. There are no fish in the Dead Sea. There's no birds around the Dead Sea. It's in a desert. It's 1,400 feet below sea level. If you travel up into the mountains, you might notice that your ears, plug up and then pop as you go up. Did you know it's just the opposite when you go below the sea level? When you go below, your ears pop, plug up and you have to pop them just like you do if you were to go higher. So it's 1,400 feet below sea level. The sea itself is made up like 33% of salt. Whereas if you talk about the Pacific Ocean or some of the other oceans, it's anywhere from 5 to 7% salt. So imagine a sea now with 33% of salt and bromides and other chemicals that it doesn't allow any kind of life to live there. One evening while I was there, some of us went down for a dip in the Red Sea. And as you got ready to walk in the Dead Sea, they said, you better keep your sandals on, Richard, because your feet will get cut by the salt that has been collected and becomes like plaque on the bottom of the surface under the sea there. It'll cut you, in other words, and so you have to wear shoes out into it. And then as you walk out further into it, you can kind of lay back and kind of float. Now, I don't know if you know this about me, but I'm not the best swimmer in the world, and I am a terrible floater. My wife is always trying to get me to show me how to float. When I float, my feet are like this here, and they just go like this here, and it's all downhill from there. But in the Dead Sea, you couldn't drown in that thing if you wanted to. You float in it. You're like a bobber. Once you lay back, your feet, you float, your feet float. If you try, you can't even pull your feet down so you can get your feet under you in order to stand up. I had to kind of, swim backwards, to get toward the shore till I was about that deep, and then I could kind of pull my feet under me and get them under me and then lift myself out of the water. It's not only that, but it's slimy. It's kind of greasy feeling. In fact, it's so greasy feeling that when you walk out, you almost slip out of your sandals or your shoes, and they have a water thing or a shower where you can shower and get the stuff off you and so forth. My point about one sea and the other is when you talk about the Sea of Galilee, it's full of all kinds of life. When you talk about the Dead Sea, it's absolutely absent of any kind of life whatsoever. Well, why is that? Because one receives fresh water, it collects it, and it continues to give, and then it gives out. No rocket science behind that. Whereas the Dead Sea, it goes down, it collects it, pulls up, stagnates, and it evaporates. Remember I told you how hot it is there? I mean, it gets plus over 100 degrees. They talk about centigrade and so forth, but it gets extremely hot there, and because it doesn't flow out or go anywhere, it eventually just evaporates, turns into salt, and they have, places there where they have, salt fields and so forth where they collect it and so forth. I think they call it something other than that. But it's a place that is completely different in every way. Well, one is, if you were to think of it this way, one sea is full of the flow of life, whether the other is full of woe and death. And as Christians, sometimes we can find ourselves in that exact same kind of place. Over in Matthew, or John the 7th chapter, verses 37 and 38, there it says, "Now on the last day, the great day of the feast, Jesus stood and cried out, saying, 'If any man is thirsty, let him come to me and drink. He who believes in me, as the scripture said, from his innermost being shall flow the rivers, or the rivers of living water.'" I've read that passage, I don't know how many different times. I've read other passages where Jesus says, "I am the water of life," or "Come and drink of me." It makes sense now when you go into a place that is so desolate and so lacking in water, in a land that drinks the water, and then think about Jesus saying, "Listen, I came that you might have water, and that you can have living water, and this living water will flow out of your innermost being." So as Christians, we can take the water that God gives us. When I think about the water that God gives us, I would say probably it has to do with a relationship with Jesus Christ in our lives. I'd say it has to do with the Holy Spirit being in our lives. I would say that it has to do with the Word of God being in our lives, not just intellectually, but it coming into our being, into our hearts, and then flowing out from us. And then, of course, the abundant life that Jesus promises us. But what some Christians do is they take this water in, and they take this water in, and they never allow the water to go out. And the result of it is it stagnates within us. It could be that, we say, well, there's just so much water, and so I need all the water that I can get. Or it could be that we might say, life is all about me. Or maybe it's about greed, or maybe it's just about bad theology that says, Jesus is only concerned with me. He's not all that concerned with other people around. And so when that happens, it becomes a water that comes in us, and it wells up, and it stagnates, and becomes lifeless. And it's something that we can't share with others. We become a Dead Sea. Or we could become a Sea of Galilee, where the water comes into us, where Jesus and his Spirit comes into our lives and his word is made manifested in our lives, and we start to live the abundant life. And people can see that life in us. They can see a joy even in the midst of difficult circumstances. And we become life-giving to those who are around us. So when you think about, geography and the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea, think about the Christian that gets to choose between one or the other. Which sea are you this evening? Are you a sea that collects and collects and collects but never gives out? Or are you one that collects and then allows that life to flow from you to those who are around? That's your choice this evening, and it's yours to make. Well, together we stand and sing and give you that opportunity.